All right, so in 4.3, we're going to talk about solving quadratic equations using square roots. So before we get into this, what is the square root of 16? Well, we know that a square root's looking for what times itself will be equal to 16. And we know that 4 times itself is 16. Right, so the square root of 16 is 4. But there's actually another solution. We can also do negative 4 times negative 4, and that will get us 16. Right? A negative times a negative is a positive. So our answer for the square root of 16 is actually positive and negative 4. So to symbolize this, we have a plus or minus sign. Plus or minus is what we call this symbol. So it means the positive and negative. Okay. All right, so there's a couple of vocab terms. A root of a polynomial equation is a solution to the equation. A zero of a function f of x is a solution to the equation f of x equals 0. So when you set your equation equal to 0 and solve, that would be a 0. So how many solutions does the equation x squared equals 25 have? Right, we want to solve for x. Now, the way we've learned so far is to solve by factoring, right? We'd factor x squared minus 25, and then we would get x plus 5, x minus 5, and then set them each equal to 0 separately, and we would get x is negative 5 or x equals positive 5. There's actually another way to solve this. Instead of moving everything to one side and factoring, we can just take the square root, right? If we do the square root of each side, then we get the square root of x squared equals plus or minus the square root of 25. And it's really important to have that plus or minus because we could have the positive or the negative number. So our answer would be plus or minus 5, right? Positive 5 times itself or negative 5 times itself. So we're going to do more problems with this quicker method where we're just taking square roots. Now, depending on your equation, you're either going to have two real solutions, so two real answers. One solution, if your equation equals 0, then your only solution would be 0. Or you'll have two imaginary solutions, so two solutions with i's. Okay, so when we're solving, we're going to isolate our squared term, and then we're going to take square roots of both sides. Remember, plus or minus. If you don't have the plus or minus, you will get the question wrong. Okay, so let's do some examples. So example number 1, we have solve 3x squared minus 27 equals 0 using square roots. So the first thing we're going to do is we want to isolate the x squared, the squared term. So first let's add 27 to the other side. That way we can get our x by itself. So we have 3x squared equals 27. Now, we want to get just x squared, so we need to get rid of this 3. So we're going to divide 3 to the other side. We get x squared equals 27 divided by 3 is 9. So now we want to take, since we got our x squared by itself, we want to take the square root of both sides. So we're going to do the square root of x squared and the square root of 9. Now the square root of x squared is just x. The square root of 9 is going to be plus or minus 3. All right, we can do 3 times 3 or negative 3 times negative 3. And that will be your answer for this first one. Okay, let's look at example number 2. We have x squared minus 10 equals negative 10. So again, we want to isolate x squared, get it by itself. So we're going to add 10 over so that the x squared is alone. We have x squared equals negative 10 plus 10 is going to be 0. Okay, now we've got our x squared by itself, so we're going to take our square root. So if we do the square root of x squared and the square root of 0, right, whatever you do to one side, you got to do the other. We have x equals, and the square root of 0 is just 0. You don't need a plus or minus here because there is no such thing as positive 0 or negative 0. So whenever your answer is 0, that's your only solution. All right, and let's do the last one here. We have solved negative 5x squared plus 11 equals 16. So again, we want to get our squared term by itself. So let's move the 11 over. So we get negative 5x squared equals 16 minus 11 is 5. Now, again, we want the squared term by itself, so we're going to divide by negative 5. We get x squared equals 5 divided by negative 5 is negative 1. Now we've got the squared term by itself, so we're going to take our square roots. So x is going to be equal to plus or minus, right? Every time we take a square root, we need plus or minus. And then what's the square root of negative 1? Well, that would be I. So our answer here is plus or minus I. So if you look, you either get two real answers, one that is 0, or two imaginary or two complex numbers.